back, streets back, alright! Hey everyone, Anthony Fantano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new Arca album, Mutant. Arca is the pseudonym of one experimental electronic music producer. This is his second full-length album. You might remember him from some previous collaborations. He has been tied to singers such as Kalela, as well as FKA Twigs. Bjork had some production on her latest album. He also worked with Kanye West on some production on his Yeezus album. Then shortly after, he dropped a pretty perplexing but somewhat underwhelming full-length debut album titled Zen, which was super abstract but maybe didn't spend enough time pulling me into the very odd world that it seemed like this music was coming from. But on this new album, on the surface, it would seem that that problem has been alleviated with the fact that this record is 20 minutes longer than its predecessor, with more expansive track lengths, more tracks, and a few strange interludes spread out among 20 songs. And there's not really that much more to talk about in terms of background with this thing, which sort of makes sense in a way because Arca's music has always sounded like it comes from a weird, contextless void that doesn't have much in the way of connections to traditional or popular music. And I think that's even more the case on this new record over here, as many of the tracks on this thing drift further away from the elements of more conventional electronic music that showed up on Zen. Arca has replaced those elements of electronic dance music and hip-hop and glitch hop with something that is just purely about sound play. This record is vivid, it is textural. I think there are notes of Tim Hecker in this track listing. I think there are notes of Oneohtrix Point Never in this track listing, but I think Arca is going for something way more abstract, kind of industrial flavored on some of these tracks, and pretty experimental and challenging. There are tons of shrill tones on this record, fractured, disconnected musical passages, heavy, powerful, overwhelming percussion and bass chunks of noise, brittle fuzz and distortion, vast, open, never-ending atmospheres. The music is a mix of frightening, pretty, and perplexing, making it really hard to kind of settle into and kind of relax while listening to anything that Arca is doing on this album. The moment I think I'm starting to figure a track out, Arca sort of pulls me back toward the edge of my seat as he kind of turns into another direction, introduces some weird, abrasive new sounds, or shattering moments of complete silence with stuttering bass and shrill loops on the title track to this thing. Eventually, the song develops into something a little bit more easygoing and coherent with these slower, prettier, very smooth synth chords. But even during its most subtle and nuanced moments, this record is pretty unsettling. Even on the song Vanity, not one of the louder tracks in the track listing here, it's loaded with these really shy, explorative melodies. But even here, this melody, it just sounds so whacked out and hideous. And not hideous in a, oh, this is awful music type of hideous. Hideous in the way where I feel like I've paid admission to walk into some kind of musical freak show, which makes the title of this record all the more fitting. There are some songs on here that I don't remember for their musical qualities, but for what they evoke in me image-wise, like the song Sinner, where I hear synths that sound like a police siren, these really weird metallic noises that read like chain link fences or dragged chains. This song contrasts greatly to the track Anger, which has these fuzzy, distorted, loud synth leads that are swapping places constantly with these snippets of music, could be samples of music that sounds like it could have come from Arca's home country of Venezuela. And there are all these strange harpsichord-ish synths on the song Sever, where it's like Arca is purposefully placing a lot of sour notes into these chords, but I can almost make out what the notes and the chords are supposed to be. Again, it's like I'm listening to something purposefully misshapen or mutated. It's like the song is alive. It's not this human-created thing. It's alive and it's trying to figure itself out, or it is just thinking to itself, why am I alive? I've said a lot about these songs so far, and I feel like I could say more, but we're only 1/3 into the album's runtime thus far. And that's how dense, overwhelming, and sometimes unpredictable this album can be. And Arca doesn't exactly let up deeper into the album either. I think it's pretty safe to say that people who merely know Arca for the production that he's placed onto other people's albums might not enjoy what goes on here, because this is nowhere near as accessible or pop-oriented as a lot of that stuff. The music that Arca does solo is way more indulgent and so much more about diving into a world where it seems like he doesn't have the opportunity to elsewhere. He's not making songs, again, as much as he is erecting digital skyscrapers in a glitched out post-apocalyptic matrix. Though eventually, Arca's formula about halfway into the record does become a little more apparent, as he continually blends these eerie, very tiny, misshapen highs and mids with monstrous, just completely unpredictable bass and percussion that just pops out like a serial killer in a slasher flick. There are some songs in the middle of this record where it seems Arca is taking a more conventional approach, like on the song Front Load, which feels like a fusion of Boards of Canada and Aphex Twin. It's very much an IDM oriented track. I think the only track in the middle of the record that I was really grabbed by was most likely the song Umbilical, which is super noisy, super cacophonous, and very rhythmic as well, and features these really stand-out vocal samples. There are a lot of moments deeper into this record that I think are intriguing, I think are strange, I'll give it that, but I don't really have much in the way of emotion for it, I guess. When it gets to songs like Gratitude and the song N, I feel like we've transitioned from making really interesting experimental compositions to just delivering all of these really indulgent exercises where no one single moment seems any more significant than the other, which was partially an issue that I had on Arca's last album as well. The cacophony eventually just sounds like a completely purposeless hodgepodge. And I appreciate the challenge, but even Arca himself, I think, stops exploring this musical world he's established by the halfway point of the album and doesn't continue to introduce new sounds, vibes, and emotions into the recipe. I thought this record was okay. I think it is really out there. It is pretty strange, and I think if you want to be challenged, I think if you want your mind bent a little bit, try this thing out. But beyond some of the awe-inspiring sound design, I don't really feel like there's anything with this album that's going to stick with me for the long term, because a lot of the experiments on here, while they're definitely left field, they just kind of sound like, I don't know, just short-term thrills for me. Hopefully what Arca has done on this record is a little more meaningful to you, though. I'm feeling a decent to strong 6 on this. Transition. Have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? Let me know your thoughts on this thing. Did you love it more than me? Did it penetrate into your mind and just kind of like go? Or were you just kind of like, Let me know. Antoine Fantoine, forever.